SEC Media Days for 2024 has officially begun and opened up with remarks from Commissioner Greg Sankey. We're going to talk a little bit about this opening up, a little bit of a preview for the week ahead, always with an Auburn focus in here. Let's get into those things right now. War Eagle to everybody, and welcome back to another edition of E2C Network Live. If you are a member of the Auburn family, you have found your place, you have found your people. Thanks so much for stopping by, hanging out with us, spending some time talking about this particular topic today, especially when it is one that is not super focused on Auburn stuff, super Auburn-centric, but it is something that a lot of people in the college football space are going to be very, very focused on and very interested in, especially those of the Auburn persuasion. So no matter who you are, however you got here and whenever you got here, across Facebook, YouTube, if you're watching the live stream, the replay, we appreciate you being here, and at least for now, being part of our little family within the Auburn family. Today's live stream, one of many probably today, because it is a very busy day across college sports and certain other aspects. Today, for this particular stream, we are talking about the opening of SEC Media Days. We are now officially underway. As of a few hours ago, really, is when it started, with Commissioner Greg Sankey getting up on the podium to talk about his opening remarks in regards to the topics, the interest pieces, expansion, NIL, litigation, all the different things that he had to talk about, wanted to address, was asked about. We want to talk a little bit about that, using that into a lead into about what do we expect? A preview of sorts of SEC Media Days, obviously with an Auburn persuasion. Can ask questions, talk about some of the things for Auburn football that won't be until the end of the week. But that's what's on tap for you in this live stream. We'd love to hear from you, especially if you are watching live. We'd like to hear your thoughts, comments, questions about the things that have or haven't been talked about. I think today is one of those days where it's almost more what hasn't been officially addressed or talked about than what has for SEC Media Day. So don't be shy. Hop into the live chat or drop comments on the replay, and we'd love to hear your perspectives about these things. Let me start off with that right there. The contrast, at least in my opinion, between SEC Media Days of last year and SEC Media Days of this year. Now, and you could even probably say a couple of years before that as well. I felt like last year when SEC Media Days kicked off and leading up to the hours and day before it, there was a bunch of news breaking. There was the announcement they were going to be in Dallas the next year, meaning this year that we're talking about now, for a welcome of Texas and Oklahoma into the SEC. And here we are sitting talking about it in reality now. This time around, there's so many big topics out there and not a lot of concrete information that even Greg Sankey went into during his press conference. So I have jotted down a few notes on our X account, Twitter account, whatever you call it these days. And we will address some of those that I think are of important note. Really, the only big takeaway that you can have from this, like the solid break, I wouldn't call it breaking news. It's just an announcement, as he typically does at every single SEC Media Days, is tell you when and where, or at least where, the next SEC Media Days will be. I don't know if the dates have been officially set, but it's always in mid-July. They will be back in Atlanta at the College Football Hall of Fame for 2025. Makes a lot of sense. You've seen them shift from Birmingham to Atlanta, back to Birmingham, in between, and then now given Dallas to welcome in Oklahoma and Texas into the SEC this time. But back in Atlanta for 2025. Obviously, that makes a lot of sense. Atlanta is a hub for the Southeastern Conference. It's where they play their championship game. It's where the College Football Hall of Fame is, and a great venue that you can do that event in as well. So that's really the big announcement out there. I do want to bring up one quote from Commissioner Greg Sankey that I thought was very poignant and very true and rings well right now. And the quote we shared on our social media, if you haven't had an opportunity to go look on there. He said, "We need more of what college football does, not less." Now, he's speaking very broadly, but he's speaking about a time of calls for unity in regards to other events that have happened in our nation and the world, but also around the swirling things that are happening just in college sports and in general. But college football seems to have, at least amongst the craziness of expansion and NIL that always will surround that at this point, seems to have a pretty good grip on what it is, who they are, and what they need to be to succeed. So I thought that was a very important and very well said statement. We need more of what college football does, not less. And you can apply that over a bunch of different things. I even commented on my personal social media account that I felt like I was listening to a presidential announcement from Commissioner Greg Sankey. And I've often said, and about especially during COVID, when all of that was going down, the level of leadership that I thought he showed of not rushing to make decisions just to respond to hysteria was very impressive. This is not me about to say that Greg Sankey, I don't even know his politics, needs to run for president. This is just me saying I felt like I was listening to someone addressing more than just sports, more than just college football today. So just interesting overarch of thoughts. I think that's my biggest takeaways from this. There were not a lot of major announcements for SEC stuff. There was a lot of just overarching discussions over the big topics and not a lot of definitive things said, whether it was NIL expansion. But I also felt like Greg portrayed a very the leadership that we've come to know with him in the SEC, and why the SEC is so well positioned historically, but also under his leadership. So I walked away impressed from that today. Let me just run through a few of the notes that we have from our social media account, where we were taking taking some notes over when he talked about. So obviously we're in Dallas, Texas, welcoming Oklahoma and Texas. There was a lot of focus on that. They showed that intro video about the SEC's, pedigree and what makes it so special, and included obviously Oklahoma and Texas in that. So there's a lot around that, what they're bringing to the table. Greg did talk a little bit about having visited both campuses, how the culture just seems to fit. And I have said this personally, that I felt when this announcement was made so many years ago that they were coming, that it was probably one of the smartest decisions the SEC ever made. And I know a lot of people are saying, well, Oklahoma's not Southeastern. Texas is its own thing, kind of. Maybe they're a little bit Southeastern, but it just fits. It really does. And it literally now just means more, because there's more 16 teams in the SEC, including now Oklahoma and Texas, that are going to factor into these particular sporting events that we all get so excited about throughout the year. So a couple other notes. Talked a lot about what the SEC has done well historically in the space of getting people into the pros. Talked a lot about how people in Texas currently that are either competing in sport events, they're happy at Texas, located in Texas for their particular teams or athletic facilities, how they connect back to the SEC. Talked about how the SEC is involved in the education and innovation space with their student athletes and more. And he also started to talk about some other topics that I know that you guys are the most interested on, which was it's time, which was around the topic of, and this is a quote from him referencing that video they watched, it's time to update, speaking about the change to college athletics and the need for government involvement in some things like NIL. I was really hoping today that we would get a little bit more concrete stuff. And there are still conversations happening throughout the day. Literally, his press conference was a mere, at the time of me recording this, 2 hours ago, and he's still making the rounds. So there may be some more things that people are able to pull out of him, but it does sound like a guy that's ready for some, he wants to be able to talk about more, but he can't, because of all of the pending things, whether it's around, he addressed state laws and conference specific rules and laws. All these things are making it so frustrating to figure out how the SEC, and ultimately for our purposes here at this channel, how it's going to affect Auburn with litigation trying to what he called modernize college athletics and make it so that I wouldn't call it righting the old wrongs, but if we are moving into a place where players are getting paid, which they are for play, that they make it right in some sense with the past. He also spoke a lot about unifying the unifying nature of college athletics, which we already addressed, in contrast to some divisive topics out there. He noted that the lawsuit settlement, the litigation that you all are aware of, that's going to result in a lot of, shall we say, marketing opportunities in college sports, to have to pay for all of that and back pay several years of former college athletes, is going to definitely change the landscape of everything. And he noted that, quote, decades of change in a matter of months are taking place, which is why it is a little bit frustrating for all of us, because we're not getting a lot of hardcore things right now. He says the states the need for national standards in regard to NIL, and also brought up something about sports gambling, which I thought was a very interesting note to bring up in the middle of all this, which again kind of gets to the nature of, it felt like a little bit like of a political campaign during some of his commentary there. But this was a very heavy topic, heavy with heavy topics, I guess I should say, from the commissioner today. We already talked about that. He announced the SEC Media Days for 2025 will be in Atlanta, so that was exciting to hear that they're heading back this direction for the next year, which I think we all expected. In his Q&A, we didn't get to hear all of them on the TV. Obviously, if you're a media member or you somehow were able to follow them on social media, you got probably all of the questions and things like that. He was asked about, for specifics of college football, what happens in the event of a tiebreaker. There's apparently a plan that is being finalized amongst all those parties that need to be involved. If there's and I would assume this is about playoffs for football, but maybe in general, how this happens going forward with 16 teams and football having no more divisions this year. How are you going to factor in a tie situations? That is being figured out. Was asked about how to lower the temperature of legal NIL issues managed he said there's a question of what can be managed at the national level and at the conference level. And the current litigation does not solve all the issues. And I think that's an important thing to stress, that everybody, well, not everybody, a lot of people maybe assume because this lawsuit happened or this litigation happened, that everything's done now. We ain't done yet, to quote a certain former Auburn coach and recruiting expert. But we ain't done yet is what I took away from that. Another big topic, and this is the big one right here that I think some of us maybe were hoping we get a little bit more out of, because other than NIL, the big topic is expansion. Will the SEC expand again? And what you heard from Commissioner Sankey was yet again some very similar comments that were asked several years ago before Texas and Oklahoma were officially announced. Very, not necessarily dodging the question, I guess you could say that was, but the statements that he made are very true at this time. Some of those people that might be looking to make moves, Florida State, Clemson, there's been conversation about them going to the Big 12 recently. The reality is they're still under contract, whether they want to be or not. And so there's nothing that a commissioner like Greg Sankey or anybody else can really do until something like that changes. So his quote, and I believe this is pretty much exactly what he said several years ago. He said, this year I'm focused on the 16, meaning the 16 teams, including Texas and Oklahoma, that are now here. And I would assume at that time it was similar to I'm focused on the 14. But time will tell. Obviously, any expansion that happens for Florida State, for Clemson, whether they go to the Big 12, somewhere else, the SEC, they've got to get their situation figured out before those real conversations can begin. So not anything to really get excited about in the expansion conversation with Greg Sankey and what he said out there, but it is obviously something he has talked about in a similar way before, and we know how it ended up here with Texas and Oklahoma in the SEC. So you just never know. I have a feeling, as I will quote a former Auburn head coach, or not head coach, but assistant coach, we ain't done yet. Okay, So that's, I think, the majority of what I wanted to talk to you guys about beginning of SEC Media Days, Greg Sankey's particular comments and some of the questions he answered. If there's something else that pops up as we finish out here, I'll bring that up. But I just want to remind you today of your schedule for the week. Again, if you're watching this live, you're watching the replay a few hours after, or even the rest of the day. Some of this has already happened. We've heard from Greg Sankey. We've already heard from LSU, and I believe South Carolina is happening right now with Shane Beamer at the time of me doing this recording. Ole Miss today, Vanderbilt today as well, in that order. Tuesday, Georgia, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Missouri. That's the 16th in that order. Wednesday, the 17th in this order. Alabama, which will be very interesting with Nick Saban as a commentator there now, watching his successor and the interactions there. Mississippi State, Florida, Texas in that order on Wednesday, the 17th. And finally on Thursday, in this order on the 18th, Arkansas, Texas A&M, Auburn, and Kentucky. Those head coaches coming up to speak. We're obviously most interested here in our Auburn representatives. That would be Coach Freeze, obviously, linebacker Eugene Asante, quarterback Peyton Thorne, and then obviously edge defensive end, where you want to categorize him as, Keldrick Falk, a very young, one of the youngest players to ever attend and represent a team at SEC Media Days. Will be there. So that is your preview. I hope you guys are ready. I want to know in the comments from you, what are you thinking about in SEC Media Days? What did you think about some of the commentary about NIL, litigation, expansion, or the lack thereof comments and hardcore discussion points? What are you focused on? What are you excited about as we preview and look ahead to the whole of SEC Media Days week? Drop some of that there. As final reminders for you, today is a humongous busy day, and this week as well. There are several things happening. We are planning at this moment, it could change, doing another live stream at midday here before a certain thing opens up in early access. There was some basketball news that we'll be discussing, very big basketball news for schedule. So I hope you guys can join us here on YouTube, especially. No set time for that yet, but somewhere in the mid-afternoon. These are the planned and scheduled things that we have. This Wednesday, Auburn Family and I, our live call-in show at 8 p.m. Eastern time. We'll also be doing our 9 o'clock show as well this Sunday for our Auburn Experience podcast. Some other things to keep in mind. Folks, today, it starts. We're in the game today. College Football 25 early access opens up. We have access. We will be playing, and we will be putting some content out there for you, most likely in the form of a first playthrough of a game, probably the Iron Bowl, and then maybe a live stream later. We will see. We're trying to figure all that out for you, so stay tuned for that. If you're interested on TikTok, we do live streams most middays about lunchtime. That'll be happening soon if you're watching this live, or the replay shortly after. So those are some things to keep in mind for this today, this week. Saddle up, folks. SEC Media Days is here. College Football 25 is here, and so much more. So I hope you guys are excited. Enjoy the week. Enjoy SEC Media Days. And I hope you guys have a great week ahead. Stay focused as much as you can on your work. Those of you that don't work from home or have to go to the job every day. But until then, we'll talk to you guys later. War Eagle.